Valve. So many people's favorite video game company. With their indelible legacy of industry-leading innovations, battle passes, acting as the primary distributor for video games on PC, and selling gambling to children, it's no wonder why they've garnered such a spotless reputation over the course of the last 2 decades. I mean, it's a perfect setup for everyone. Developers get the privilege of selling their game on the biggest market for a mere 30% of their revenue, and consumers have an easy way to give money to their favorite billionaire. What's not to love? Here's a pretty cool little-known fact about Valve, actually. They used to make games. I know, it sounds crazy, but it's true. Before they learned they could just print money through maintaining servers for Dota, CS, and Steam, Valve made actual games, and not just Dota spin-offs and VR experiments. I'm being a little glib, but I really don't like Valve. Obviously, I still use Steam, everyone on PC does, but I feel like they constantly go under the radar for business practices that are anti-consumer, anti-developer, or both, and a legion of losers online will defend them to the death because Steam as a platform is convenient to use, and to be honest, that riles me up even more. The thing that makes me doubt what's otherwise a pretty well-examined dislike, though, is that with a lot of the games they've made in the past, Valve's legacy is kind of undeniable. Case in point, and the subject of this video, Portal 2. As much as I have issues with Valve, I cannot deny that Portal 2 is one of the best games ever made. Quick rundown of Portal 1 before I get into the game proper. You play as a woman in a science facility run by an evil robot that tests you with puzzles. At the end of the game, you beat the evil robot. So in Portal 2, you play as the same woman, but you've been in some kind of long-term human storage that breaks as the game starts. A little orb guy named Wheatley comes up and decides to help you get out of the facility, which you do using a gun that shoots portals. Your means of interacting with the game world is shockingly limited, considering this is a puzzle game. Functionally, you have 4 things in your toolkit: the blue portal, the orange portal, unlocked a little later in the game, the ability to lift some objects, and the ability to move your character. That's it, and the first few puzzles reflect this simplicity. It's mostly just place a portal to go somewhere, then pick up an object and put it on a button, and at that point the puzzle is more or less done. The first test chamber that I think is really interesting is called Cube Momentum, which introduces the idea of momentum as a factor in the puzzles. This is basically the core of almost every other puzzle in the game, so it's pretty important that this one was nailed, but the way they go about teaching you the mechanic is insanely smart. Here it is.
Wherever a lack of shelter from space debris does not appear to be a deliberate part of the test.
It's crazy, right? No tutorial pop-ups, not like a clean environment that demonstrates the mechanic, it's just intuitive. You fall into a portal on the ground, so when you pop out of the one higher on the wall, your downward momentum is converted to forward momentum and you pop out a little farther forward than you otherwise would have. They then reinforce the mechanic by having you do the same thing with a stationary cube, and at that point you've completely learned the mechanic without said mechanic being pointed out to you at all. From there you have all of the knowledge you need to finish the rest of the test chamber. There's a button that drops a cube and a button that puts up a wall, so knowing that the cube's gonna fall through the portal pretty fast, you have to time raising the wall and then you're home free. This is functionally the last tutorial level, but what's interesting is that the tutorial has never felt like a tutorial because the design of the test chambers are so great. Up to this point, the chambers have been sort of soft remakes of Portal 1's levels, which, if you've played the first game, makes you ignore the fact that new players are being introduced to core mechanics while you're absorbing the lore. What happened to the testing facility since the last game? How is everything this dilapidated? We get an idea as to what's up when we continue into the facility a little deeper and we see the corpse of Glados, the main villain from the first game, rusted over and just as destroyed as the day we beat her. Since she was in control of the facility and she's been shut down, the facility has become absolutely wrecked with the natural passage of time. It's pretty much just us and Wheatley left alive, or, online, so we head over to try and find the escape pod lever, but something goes wrong with Wheatley's hacking, so the facility is back online, including Glados. Considering we're now staring her down, this is probably a bad thing. With Glados now in control, there are new gameplay elements introduced to the puzzles that keep the variety going, but this time they're all hostile. Lasers, turrets, death pits, you know the drill, to reflect the fact that Glados hates us. In sort of a broad sense, I think that a lot of the time, a puzzle game based around specific gameplay rules lives and dies on how much the things that are out of the player's control can innovate, and that's what these additional elements do. Like, just the portals and cubes works, but is there really going to be all that much to differentiate one level about moving cubes using portals from another level about moving cubes using portals? The fact that Portal 2 never gets complacent with one concept before introducing something else keeps the game consistently fun. Looking at Picross, for example, it's a genre of puzzle game I have fun playing, but when the grid gets big enough, it goes from fun to tedious really quickly because overusing a mechanic is a really easy thing for puzzle games to slip up on. At the same time though, you can add in new elements all you want, but if your game is too short, then it feels like those elements never get a chance to shine, which was an issue with the first Portal game. Bringing it back to Portal 2, none of the things it introduces to keep the gameplay fresh are neglected, which adds to every test chamber, because you're thinking of these different things as tools in the greater puzzle that the level represents, rather than as the singular gimmick to get through the stage. It's kind of hard to explain why a puzzle is designed well, but for me, I think it comes down to how much you want to engage with it. If you're thinking about how does this gel interact with the gravity beam, and what do I do to get rid of the turrets, and how can I get over to the door using these things, that's good, and what Portal 2 constantly has you doing. And if you're thinking, this laser is the key, how do I get to the door, that's maybe slightly less good. Anyways, what was I saying? Oh yeah, GLaDOS hates us because we killed her, so now she's got us doing tests, and lots of them, but the whole time she's absolutely ripping us a new one. Like, she's constantly calling our character fat in an extremely catty way and fucking with us while we try to solve the puzzles, which is pretty funny. This is just about as good of a place as ever to go over the comedic writing in the game, so I'll hit on that real quick. I think Portal 2 might be some of the best comedy writing in video games in general, which is pretty impressive. It's admittedly a low bar, considering I think Borderlands is generally best played with the voices muted and subtitles disabled, but there are moments in Portal 2 where I chuckled to myself.
Some emergency testing may require prolonged interaction with lethal military androids. Rest assured that all lethal military androids have been taught to read and provided with one copy of the Laws of Robotics to share.
There are a couple of jokes that maybe haven't aged well, like I'm pretty sure you can't really call people vegetables anymore.
And whose fault do you think it's going to be when the management comes down here and finds 10,000 flipping vegetables?
And the Space Corps is rooted in quirky early 2010s humor that I kinda hate.
So much space. Need to see it all.
It rides up just a little too close on the law random, and that is very much not my thing. To be a little less negative, one of the best jokes in the game involves GLaDOS messing with a launch pad to call you fat, while you're bouncing up and seeing Wheatley talk about how he got away, but only in fragments, so you get launched up and he's yapping about a bird or whatever, and it's really funny.
This plate must not be calibrated to someone of your generousness. I'll add a few zeros to the maximum weight. You look great, by the way. Very healthy. Try it now.
Right? Couldn't believe it either.
You seem to have defeated its load-bearing capacity. Well done. I'll just lower the ceiling.
It's also a perfect segue into Wheatley breaking us out. After we do a few tests, he takes down a wall and we sneak through the back rooms of the facility to get to GLaDOS. Not much to comment on this segment, so I'm gonna mention the lore. While we're escaping, and one time a bit earlier, GLaDOS says something about seeing a deer, and that she'd show it to us if we do more tests. Obviously she won't, GLaDOS is very petty, but what's interesting is that while she didn't see a deer, she did see, quote, some humans.
I didn't see the deer today. I did see some humans. But with you here, I've got more test subjects than I'll ever need.
The fact that this is a notable occurrence and not just an everyday event is pretty significant, because when we also look at the fact that our character was in a cryosleep or something, it almost implies that Portal 2 is kind of a post-apocalypse game, and we're trapped in this weird facility run exclusively by a robot that's designed to infinitely test who knows what, despite the fact that there would be nobody to test it for. When you think about it, there's an air of sadness to GLaDOS from this angle, because all she knows is testing. Her existence would basically have no purpose if it weren't for this arbitrary testing, so her raison d'etre is, in a way, our character. Put a pin in this, I'm going to mention it again during the ending. Speaking of GLaDOS, we get to her chamber with Wheatley, then replace her with Wheatley to get out of the facility. Plot twist, Wheatley is a stupid fucking idiot and decides that actually he wants to control the facility rather than get away from GLaDOS, so he turns her into a potato and sends Potato, GLaDOS, and us down a bottomless pit. There's another tonal shift at this point in the game as far as how the levels are designed. We've gone from the remnants of Portal 1's destroyed, overgrown test chambers to whatever GLaDOS can whip up on the fly, and now we're in the ruins of Aperture's original testing area, which is far more open and far more static than what we've been doing previously. While these are still testing chambers, there are far less cubes and launch pads and stuff to indicate that these areas are relics of the past. Instead, we get gel. Gel is a really interesting mechanic because it feels so volatile compared to everything we've been interacting with previously, which tended to be somewhat concrete in terms of what it can and can't do. With gel, there's a lot more looseness in how it could potentially be used, even if that isn't necessarily the case. It feels like, if you found an opportunity, you could do some cheeky portal tech with blue gel to bounce yourself out of the bottomless pit, or with orange gel you could sprint into it and launch yourself up and out somehow, or with white gel, I mean God only knows what you could do with white gel. But the trick with it is that the level design feeling more open, as if you would have the opportunity to do that, actually limits what you can do really effectively. If you look at it without the set dressing, you really only have a few platforms that you can interact with as part of the puzzle, but the belief that it instills in you, however false, that you can just, go out is a sign of really great environmental design. For that matter, the gel puzzles are really fun too. The portals are cool and all, but there's just something about bouncing really high without needing to find the perfect portal spots to make it work, or being able to move super fast in the orange gel that's just kinda neat. I especially like the parts that send you flying over giant falls to your death. Ignore the fact we just survived the bottomless pit. It feels like imminent danger in a completely different way to the turrets and lasers. My favorite of the gel puzzles is probably 3 gels, which feels like everything you've learned with them coming together perfectly for a really great puzzle. As the test chamber's title implies, you're given largely unrestricted access to all 3 of the gels, and you have to get up to the exit using said gels. The trick, though, is that you're extremely limited as far as what you can do. There are only a couple of useful portal surfaces, so you have to properly finagle putting every portal in the right place with the right gel to get through the puzzle. There's this one moment where you'll inevitably bounce towards a portal surface, and you might just assume that you're supposed to shoot a portal on it to launch yourself with the forward momentum from a bounce, but the trick is that actually, that's not where a portal is supposed to go. In fact, you're supposed to put a portal there so that you don't have to put a portal there, which sounds confusing, but in the process of figuring out what you're supposed to do at that step of the puzzle, you're going to have this revelation that actually you need to put a portal on the surface, then in the white gel so that it'll splatter onto above the portal surface, whereupon you smack portals on your newly white ceiling and the blue gel to add another bounce to the chain and bounce your way to the promised land. It's such a cool revelation when you figure out that's what you have to do to solve this segment of the test chamber, and that's the type of shit that really gets me going with puzzle games. While you're in this area, there's a lot of pretty major lore stuff happening in the background, all occurring through voice memos given by Cave Johnson, former CEO of Aperture. I don't want to get too far into the nitty-gritty of what they all say, but the general implication of a lot of it is a, let's just say, morally gray tech company doing a little bit of human experimentation over a number of years as the size of the company and the scope of their products expands. Towards the end of the segment, we get a speech from Cave Johnson about getting violent with lemons, essentially saying that people need to, well, he specifically needs to, try and fight back against the things that life throws at you, which seems like, generic CEO talk.
I'm gonna get my engineers to invent a combustible lemon that burns your house down!
Fighting people. He said what we're all thinking.
The point is, if we can store music on a compact disc, why can't we store a man's intelligence and personality on one?
Until he coughs mid-diatribe and we realize that actually this whole memo is just an aging man realizing that no matter how valuable he is, no matter how much money he's made, death comes for us all. It's the only thing that's truly inevitable in every single person's life, and in the real world, this whole situation with Cave Johnson is constantly playing out. There's a reason all of the big-time tech CEOs these days look weird as fuck. Cave also mentions that he wants to have his consciousness put into a computer to run the facility as a last-ditch attempt to save himself from his fast-approaching mortality. If the engineers don't pull this off, though, he wants his assistant, Carolyn, to run Aperture. It doesn't take much to put the pieces together. Potato Glados excitedly cheering at the lemon speech, the idea of the CEO uploading themselves to a computer to run the Aperture testing facility, and Carolyn running the facility after Cave Johnson died, and it's pretty clear that Glados is, at least in part, Carolyn, but uploaded into a computer to run the facility in perpetuity. This adds a wrinkle to that pin from earlier, because now that we know Glados is at least partly a human psyche, it becomes even sadder that she might experience the ennui of existing without a purpose if we do manage to successfully escape the facility. Don't take that pin out just yet, I have to reference it again in the ending, but I gotta build up to it properly, you know? Alright, so back to the main quest. We've finally gotten back into the facility proper, and we quickly bump into Wheatley shitting up the facility. Having been hooked up to its core, Wheatley now has this innate desire to test shit, just like Glados did, but the problem is he's an idiot, so his idea of a good puzzle is just pressing a button to open the door.
Designed this test myself. It's a little bit difficult. Oh, yes. Oh, well done. Oh, that's tremendous.
When she was in control, Glados was barely able to whip up test chambers as fast as we could clear them, so when Wheatley literally can't conceptualize how to make a test chamber, let alone how to do it with speed, he resorts to just digging into Glados' half-finished chambers and haphazardly slapping them together. Yet again, this gives a completely different feel to this segment's puzzles compared to the tutorial areas, or Glados' test chambers, or the old Aperture chambers. We're in the Wheatley zone now, for better or for worse. Mostly for worse. That doesn't apply to the puzzles though. I think these are the most engaging ones in the entire game, and almost all of them are really well made, even if the situation that's supposed to be playing out in the game's narrative is that they're a bunch of random slices of nothing that weren't ever intended to be together. With this being the end of the game, there aren't really any new elements being introduced, so these are kind of the final tests of your understanding of how all the puzzle mechanics work and how they interact with each other. This also includes the gravity beams. Apparently they're called excursion funnels, but gravity beams sounds cooler to me, which are introduced in a couple of shortish levels before you're fully let off the leash. I'm going to go over one of these endgame test chambers in a little more detail than the last couple of puzzles I've shown because these are especially neat and you appreciate the solution if you understand the process more. This one's called Laser Catapult. You've got a gravity beam, a laser, a couple of cubes, and a launcher, and you have to figure out how to lower a couple of platforms to your level so that you can get up to the door. What I find really interesting about this is that everything is laid out really clearly for you without much fluff at all. This laser trigger lowers platform A, that button lowers platform B, and here are your tools. Good luck. The trick with the puzzle is that it's actually divided into segments, and you have to figure out what order to put the segments in so that you can complete the greater puzzle. Any individual part is pretty simple. Redirect the laser to turn off the gravity beam so that there's a route to the first cube, launch yourself from this diagonal platform for this cube and that diagonal platform for that cube, use the mirror cube to send the laser through a portal, and that should be all you need, but things aren't quite clicking. For example, how do I redirect the laser without having any cubes? How do I get that cube if there's no way to get through the gravity beam? And then it all starts to click. You use the gravity beam to build up height so that you can fall into a portal, launch out of another one, and get cube A. Then you block the laser using cube A to turn off the gravity beam. Since the height strategy relied on it, that'll no longer work for cube B, so you have to use the launch pad that seemed like a misdirection to give you enough forward momentum by going through the portal you launched from to get to cube A so that you can get cube B. This lets you redirect the laser rather than just block it, so now you can lower platform A, at which point you now need to lower platform B, so to do that you just have to re-enable the gravity beam by portaling cube B away, then place a portal to raise cube A up to platform B's button, and you've done it. It sounds like a lot when you explain it like this, yes, but when you find the first step, it's like dominoes. Just boom, 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 puzzle solved. It's like puzzle game Quaaludes.
Non-narcotic, non-addictive, bring back the fucking...
Portal 2 endgame test chambers.
You can take all the fucking...
Blueprints, Pokemon friends,
and all them fucking designers
puzzle games
they make today and stick them up your fucking ass! There's nothing like a fucking...
Portal 2 endgame test chamber. I could yap about how good these are for a while, but in an effort to keep this to a reasonable length, I'm gonna skip right through them and jump to the ending. So we finally confront Wheatley. Rather, he confronts us, then we escape, and then we confront him. And after a pretty easy boss fight, we take out Wheatley by sending him into space, restore Glados to her rightful position as the overseer of the Aperture test facility, and then we get to the real meaty part of the ending. Glados says that she deletes the Carolyn part of her program, and then, despite that, she lets us go, away from the infinite tests and the passive-aggressive sniping, out into the real world. Shockingly out of character, considering she supposedly just deleted the part of her that would presumably have sympathy to us, and the fact that Glados was incredibly eager to keep us testing until we die earlier in the game. So the obvious question is, why? And here is where we go back to that pin from earlier, the fact that Glados was at least part human, and our doing the test chambers was the only thing she had to live for. The answer to it all comes in the form of the jokey ending song, which offers a ton of insight into Glados' character now. Since our character is no longer there, Glados' song is sort of her revealing what her actual thoughts on us are, away from all of the posturing and fat jokes that she'd been doing for the last 2 games. Okay, lyrical analysis time.
I used to want you dead, but now I only want you gone.
This one's pretty simple. Glados is very literally saying that over the course of her time as a potato, she learned to understand our perspective, which goes into the second lyric.
Now little Carolyn is in you too.
As I mentioned earlier, Glados does a lot of posturing, so this is more or less an admission that rather than deleting Carolyn, as she said she did, the exact opposite has happened, and she's managed to reconnect with that part of her, and in realizing that she is, at least part human, she was able to empathize with our attempt to escape.
Goodbye, my only friend. Oh, did you think I meant you? That would be funny if it weren't so sad.
This is that pin coming back again, because Glados has realized that, in fact, our existence as a part of the facility is important to her. She's realized just how purposeless she would be if it weren't for putting us through test chambers, and it's kind of hitting her.
Oh, when I delete you, maybe I'll stop feeling so bad.
First, gotta point out that this is written as redacted in the game's lyrics, but this serves to further emphasize that Glados does actually care for our character by the end of the game, So despite the fact that her conscience took over and freed us, she can't help but be saddled with the fact that the only person she's meaningfully interacted with in the last however many years, shit decades, is now leaving her life, presumably for good. It's a sign of humanity.
Well, you have been replaced.
This one's a lot more intricate than the last few, kind of the infinite jest of Portal 2 ending song lyrics, but what it means is that the co-op levels are set after the single-player story. Pretty big revelation, I know. Speaking of which, I didn't do the co-op levels for this video, but they're also great because there's such a strong design philosophy behind Portal 2's puzzles in general. It's so strong, in fact, that the only mark I have against Portal 2 is that there simply isn't enough of it. The incredibly tight pacing is a strength of the main campaign, but at the same time, it can occasionally feel like something is introduced and could have had more time to shine. The orange gel and the light bridges are the ones that I feel get sidelined too much, and a bunch of additional levels that don't need to be tied to the story would be a really nice way to fully explore what these things can do. It's too late for that though. Valve can't make video games anymore because it would cut into Gaben's mega yacht budget. It's a little saddening to me that Portal 2 is likely the end of the franchise because everything about this game is just so incredibly well done. I've already mentioned the puzzle design, of course, but even the story. Puzzle games don't really have stories, let alone good ones, but Portal 2's is absolutely amazing. The writing is so tight, there's so much depth to everything despite the fact that there's 4 characters and one of them doesn't say or do anything, and that's not even mentioning the fact that it's actually funny. Video games are not supposed to be legitimately funny, and yet here it is. If Portal 2 is how the series has to end, then it is what it is. I would rather look back on the great experience that this game represents than desperately fight to get a mediocre, uninspired Portal 3 just for the sake of saying the series is technically alive.